Hi everyone, very, very honoured and grateful to be here. The room also looks way bigger from up here because I was only over there and now there's so many more people. So yeah, my name is Adam Lind. I am an author and a content creator, but I guess more importantly, I'm a curious human and a human connection advocate. That's something I call myself and feel really passionately about. How I came to write Floating Home is, a story that could take all day. But I guess to sum it up, there was a really pinnacle moment in my life. When I was 17, I lost my father to addiction. He was an alcoholic. And it's a really interesting concept when you lose a parent as a teenager, because you've got these two sides of you. You know, I still wanted to be a teenager, or I wanted to be out, and all my friends were like, who are we going to kiss at the weekend? And like, where are we going to go? And who are we going to hang out with? But at the same time, I was grieving and asking myself all these questions of like, you know, where's my dad gone and what's the point of life and how is any of this going to where's this going to go? And during that grieving process, I had this moment that I remember so clearly where life became obviously impermanent. And I feel like once I understood the impermanence of life, I was looking at many people that were older than me and family members, and they seemed stressed and they seemed unhappy with the way they were living. And I couldn't understand why, if we knew that life was finite and it was impermanent, why these people kept doing all these things that weren't serving them and they didn't want to do. So I kind of vowed to myself at this really young age that I would try and live through experiences, that I just want my life to basically be full of fun, I guess, without sounding too privileged, and we can move on to that in a bit. But like, yeah, just not follow an ordinary path and live in a way that felt, when I get to my deathbed, I could look back at hopefully the age of 80, 90 and be like, that was really fun.
We're going to move into your book and the themes within it, but on the front cover of the book is a canal boat, and your social media, it becomes very obvious that that's the life you've chosen to live. Would you mind telling us how you came to live on a boat?
Yeah, so I live on a canal boat with my wife and dog who are sitting at the back, Lauren and Shanti. We've lived on a canal boat for 5 years. We travel around the UK on it. Again, it was a bit of a crazy story because I met my wife at university, and when we graduated, we decided that we weren't ready for the real world, quotation marks. So we saved a few £1,000s and we decided that we were going to try and hitchhike from London to India. So the plan was no aeroplanes, no trains, no buses, just rely completely on the kindness of strangers. We were on the road for 5 years, and I'm sure we're going to get more into that anyway. And basically, at the end of the stint, we spent a year in India, and I'm not going to lie, we were fucking exhausted. And we kind of had this really strange situation where we knew we had this like nomadic tendency in our blood. We didn't want to be settled somewhere, but we'd been living out of a back for so long, our backs were breaking, and we needed some kind of routine and some kind of base. So we moved back to the UK during lockdown, and it was actually my mother-in-law that one day was like, oh, would you guys ever consider living on a boat? I'm convinced, we were living with her, I'm convinced she just wanted us out the house. And it was the only viable thing that we couldn't even afford. We took a loan to buy the boat, but it felt for us at that time, it was the great middle ground between still being able to move around, but have a base that we could finally call our own. Like, we bought plates on one of the first days, and we were like, these are our plates. Like, we hadn't owned plates in so many years. Now we still live on that boat today.
I don't want to just touch on the hitchhiking across the world, because I think we need to focus on that for a little bit. In that 5-year journey you guys went on, are there any key stories you can share and any takeaways you had from those moments?
Hundreds, but I guess the biggest takeaway for me is that human beings are craving connection, and we are being continuously cultured into a disconnected society where, you know, the media and everything around us is projecting, be scared of your neighbors, be scared of the people around you. I personally don't watch or listen to mainstream news, which I've had a really interesting debate recently with someone who called that really ignorant. And I know that is ignorant in some regards, but it's like my activism is to see all of the small, amazing acts of human kindness that happen every day and try and be a part of those. Because, yeah, that's what I learned. We hitchhiked through France to Spain, and people would pick us up and they'll be like, oh, when you get to Spain, like this is going to happen, you know, and like kind of say horrible things about that country. And as soon as we get to Spain, they're like, oh, I bet in France they're all like this, you know. And we saw that border to border when we got to the Balkans. All the people were nervous about us going into like Turkey and Bulgaria and Romania, and we had just the most incredible experiences. And I guess what I feel like I learned is when you open yourself vulnerably and authentically, that people just are yearning for this connection. But did you want like a specific story?
I'm gonna get it out of you.
Okay, all right.
There was I know there was a story where you and your wife were very kindly taken a long distance by two men, and that is a story I would love you to tell the audience. Yeah.
Okay, this is one that's like, people often say like, what is, like, did anything bad or scary ever happen? And it kind of annoys me. And in the book I talk about, isn't it funny that that's the first thing people ask, like they still want to find the negative within this like beautiful story. And I will advocate to say before I tell this story that 99.9% of the experiences were good. I even said to my mum, like, one day, if I get killed hitchhiking, you better not tell people not to hitchhike because like 99.9% of the experiences were still incredible. But yeah, I'll try and condense the story. But we were traveling through Turkey, which was by far the best, easiest and kindest country we hitchhiked in. People, you'd get picked up like first or second car every time. We'd kind of like document each country, the average wait time. Like Spain was an hour, France was 35 minutes, Turkey less than 2 minutes. And they would insist on taking you for lunch and taking you to their home. And we used to say like the worst part about hitchhiking in Turkey was that if you do a big journey with someone, they take you for a big lunch, then you go to the next ride, then they're going to take you for a big lunch. So it was like this. I like that, so I'm going to condense this story. We get picked up by two guys. We travel a very far distance with them. As soon as we get in the car, there was no pleasantries like normal of, you know, what's your job and this and that. It was very much like, what do you think happens when you die? And like, what's the purpose of life and all of this? And I hate small talk, so I was fully in. I was like, this is a conversation I can really like get to grips with. And it comes to near pretty much a couple of minutes before the end of the journey, and the guy in the passenger seat, a fly flies in the window and it lands in his eye. So we pull into a gas station for him to go into the toilet and wash his eye. And as he goes in, the driver turns around to us and says, you see that guy in the passenger seat who, might I add, hadn't said a word the whole time because he didn't speak English. He was like, he's one of the kindest men I've ever met, but he did just get out of prison for killing his wife. And then the driver turns to us and says, and I met him in prison, and I was also in there for killing my wife. And my poor wife at the back grasps my leg. I could see, like, I describe it in the book, like I'd literally see the sweat beads pouring from her face. She's like shaking a bit. And, you know, we were literally a couple of minutes from the end. We get out of the car, they help us with the bags, they buy us an orange juice, write their number on a card, and they say, you know, like, anything you need, da-da-da. And we get out of the car, and Lauren turns to me, and she's like, oh my God, like, I was so scared, and da-da-da. And I don't know what came over me, but I felt very calm, and I felt like there was a real lesson within this. And to caveat, I don't condone death. I don't condone murder. I'm not even for 1% saying what these guys did was okay. The interesting part was we'd just spent 2 to 3 hours with these guys, had the most incredible experience, the most incredible conversations. They'd helped us so much. Do I now hate them? Like, finding out this piece of information? And I don't know the answer, by the way. I'm not saying I should or shouldn't, and it's created some really interesting conversations, and I go into it in the book. But yeah, it was just one of these situations that I felt taught me a lot about life. I mean, the murder is a really extreme one, but do we find out stuff about anyone's past on a small thing and then judge them as a character compared to how they've, you know, how we've connected with them throughout the whole time we've known them? And yeah, it just was a really interesting topic on forgiveness and do people deserve a second chance and that kind of stuff. But most people were great.
In that situation, you're feeling quite safe, and then you have a wave afterwards of sort of vulnerability and being like, what have I just walked into? Did you have that far less than going into other people's cars? Did you always feel a sense of safety as part of your character, like having that adventure and feeling safe in a lot of situations? Or did you go traveling and sort of break down that fear?
Yeah, good question. I feel like when I was writing the book and I was trying to think, like, why do I trust strangers so much? Like, why am I obsessed with
Saying
human...
this is someone who does.
Yeah.
Very easily. So.
Well, why am I so obsessed with human connection? And I remember being a child, like because my dad was so in turmoil myself, I was essentially raised by my mum and sister. I always say I was raised in a household of Spice Girls and periods. Like, I'm very in touch with kind of the feminine side of myself, and being like a straight male, that's been like a really interesting like part of learning about my masculinity. But living in that house, our house was full of people all the time. My mum had an open door policy. We'd always joke like, what stranger from the street are you inviting for Christmas? And it was always just full of people. So I think I trusted very young that people were good. But I would also say it's like, with the hitchhiking thing, we didn't get into every car that stopped. Like, one thing I learned massively was about trusting your gut and how much your intuition tells you. Like, sometimes a car would stop and it would feel, we don't want to get in this car. And we politely say, oh, thank you, but move on. I'm not saying blindly go and talk and trust and connect with everyone you ever meet. Like, I want to be a realist in this as well. But yeah, hope that answered your question.
It definitely did. In your writing, you also speak a lot about happiness and purpose. Could you share with us some things, what this means to you, and also how that's changed over the last sort of 5-6 years?
Yeah, I feel like for many, many years, and still to a degree now, I was an absolute like slave to my mind. Like, I have OCD, I suffer really badly with intrusive thoughts. Ever since I was a child, I can remember like I could be walking home from school, my mind would be like, what would happen if you don't run and touch that lamppost in like the next 10 seconds, your mum's going to drop dead. And I'd like run to the lamppost and I'd touch it, and learned these were called intrusive thoughts. And I felt like internally I was struggling quite a lot, and I was searching everywhere outside of myself for this happiness, this contentment. Like, I traveled the world for 5 years, like lived on the boat, traveling and doing all this stuff. And although it did bring temporary happiness, I felt like, and I feel like now, the real search for freedom that I was on is only going to come if we find it internally rather than externally. And I was always searching for freedom externally, and now my journey and the whole message behind this book is how do we find freedom internally? Because if we find freedom within ourselves, then like all of the external kind of just becomes like an added bonus, and we don't rely on it as much. And one thing I'd love to touch on there is some people will be like, well, what a privileged thing to say. You live in England and you're safe and you're this and you're that. Well, one of my favorite books is A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And if you've not read it, he was taken into the concentration camps in the Holocaust. And he himself says that's where he found freedom, because he was like, they can take everything from me, but they can't take my mind. And I was like, wow, if this man was able to find it, then surely I'm able to find it. And yeah, just continually for me moving into what's happening internally is where I feel I'm finding true happiness.
I completely agree with that sort of viewpoint. And I think it's such an amazing thing to know that we do have the time every day to work towards that. We don't need to be in a specific place. But because you did travel for 5 years, do you feel like there was a sort of sweet spot which any of us could have at some point in our lives away from work and away from London, which was a really enjoyable amount? Like, at a year, did you feel you'd completely switched off from London life, or was it sort of 4 years in and we're all doomed to ever take that break?
No, do you know what? I actually think the opposite. I think, when you travel for so long, some days can be quite mundane. Like, if we were somewhere for like a couple of weeks, we just like sit and read or do whatever. And like we say now, sometimes if we just go on like a long weekend trip, but it's like a very intentional trip. So, using the phone less. Or I just went on this journey, a social experiment actually, where I walked from Birmingham to London for 8 days with a stranger, and we weren't allowed to spend any money. So we had no food, no anything. And these 8 days honestly felt like years. Like it felt like a real remembrance of when I traveled. And I feel like completely changed me as a person yet again, because I fully believed in human kindness and connection when we did this trip. And I've been back now for quite a few years. And, you kind of do fall into your own routine. And, I found a lot of like spiritual practices on the road, and I was so believing in the law of attraction attraction and synchronicities. And then like as life became more normal again, I was a bit like, oh, was I just like a young hippie boy? Like maybe I don't believe that anymore. And then being back on this walk only a few weeks ago and just surrendering and being so open to whatever was going to happen, magic was just landing in our laps every day. So I think it's more about, someone taught me recently this concept of time, that I think it's from Greek philosophy. You have kainos time and kairos time. And in kainos time is what we kind of live most day to day. Is like 9 o'clock I have work, you know, we're all going to get here today at 12, it's going to finish at 6, and my alarm's set for this time. Whereas kairos time is when we're basically living, but we're not bound by any time. So there's still 24 hours in a day, but the 8 hours don't matter. So now what I've tried to start doing is schedule in my calendar like 2 days a month, just called like a kairos day, where a day of no obligations, a day of where I can just go and I'll eat when I'm hungry and I'll sleep when I'm tired and I'm not bound by time. And I think even doing that for a day or 2 days a month can completely change your life actually, because it just allows you to pause and go inwards. And it's like I say in the book, just this like invitation to look inside yourself and kind of start to ask the questions of what you actually want, because otherwise time's just going to keep passing, I think.
Yeah, I've recently been, instead of going for a walk with music or a podcast or to see a friend, there's always sort of, you're either taking in information or you're thinking about the next thing. I'd highly recommend taking a week where you don't let yourself listen to music on your commute, because you definitely see the world in a different way. And yeah, I've really been making that decision recently. And I think, like you said, it's sort of tapping back into that, noticing signs and noticing people's energy and little moments. So would recommend doing that. On your social media, you also speak a lot about masculinity. And I think this is a conversation which is continuing to evolve. Why do you think it's so important that we speak about it?
I think, I guess from my standpoint, people always say to me, like, I bare my soul to anyone that will listen. Like, I don't really have a filter, just tell everyone everything. And everyone's like, how are you so vulnerable? And I'm like, I don't see myself as being vulnerable. It's always come quite naturally to me. And I noticed when I was having conversations, particularly with the men in my life, they would say, oh, I feel like I can open up to you about stuff that I don't open up to other people, because you tell me so much about yourself. And that for me was like a real tipping point of like, wow, so actually just by being vulnerable and expressing something to someone else, they will give it back. And I mean, look, you guys know what the culture and society is like, the statistics of, you know, men taking their life. And the statistic I heard the other day about how they believe in the next 3 years, the percentage of body dysmorphia will be higher in men than it is in women. And I just found that fascinating, how like this is happening, you know, in the background, but there's so much more spoken about when it comes to women. And I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by a lot of men that hold like men's circles and men's retreats. And when you're there and you see these men just talk in a way that they feel they've never had the permission to speak about before. And I think because then, you know, it then feeds into the relationship they have with the females in their life or whoever else is in their life. So I think we kind of need to be, I sometimes have a bit of a hang up with like, you know, I'm a straight white male and we're really hated in society at the moment. And it's like, we kind of, if we keep like villainizing this group, then how are we ever going to progress? So it's like having the spaces where these people can show up in the way that they need to show up, to then they in turn can have more compassion for everyone else.
Yeah, that was a brilliant answer. It's also Movember, and I feel like I know the charity quite well, and that's a year-round project. And I think that's also, like you're saying, it's something we need to keep tackling and talking about. It shouldn't always be needed to be prompted by particular month or anything. Obviously, living on a boat is a non-traditional way of life. What are some takeaways and like things you have gotten out of this choice? And is there anything people not living on a boat could learn from those like yourself?
Yeah, I feel like, to be honest, the boat itself is like great, and obviously like it's been our home now for 5 years, so it just feels like home. And recently we've been deciding like, how long do we see ourselves on a boat, and could we see ourselves in a house? And it's so much less about the boat, it's about the community. Like, people on the water have more time. People on the water want to connect. People help each other in a way that I feel like I'd only seen in like proper living communities. And one of the most interesting thing about the boating community is, you know, there's like 2,000 miles of canal network in the UK that are all interconnected, and all these people are sharing this network of water. And normal communities are probably bound together by a shared set of beliefs. Maybe that's a political view, maybe that's the way they want to live. But actually we're the most like dysfunctional community, because the guy on the boat next to me might be way older and retired and right wing and whatever, and the girl next to me might be, you know, completely different music taste or fashion sense or whatever it is. We're all so different, but we're so united. And that's something I didn't know before I moved onto the water. And at the end, the book is structured as 10 life topics, and at the end of each chapter, there's a contribution from a boater, from someone that lives on a boat. And it's not really about like, I live on a boat because it's about their story of what led them to the water. Because as soon as I meet another boater, I'm not really interested what toilet they've got or all the questions people ask. Is what made you make this choice? Because everyone on the water has a story. I mean, everyone in this room has a story, but like that's something I've found that's just incredible.
On that note, because it is such a brilliant addition to the book, were there any stories, whether it's from the ones here or others, which you would like to share, which you felt particularly inspired by?
Yeah, there's one particularly resonant at the moment that I'll try not to get emotional about. I think I'll be fine. So the last chapter of the book is called The Art of Acceptance, because it's the thing I'm constantly trying to forever work through. I really wanted this book to not be like, here's 10 life lessons that I've got sorted, because I have none of them sorted. Sometimes I read my own words back and I'm like, God, I need to be him again at the moment, because he clearly had his head in a good place. But yeah, The Art of Acceptance is all about how can we accept what's happening, and from that place of acceptance, that's how we can like implement something. And there's an amazing woman called Louise who I gave a talk a few years ago, and she approached me at the end of the talk and told me that she was moving onto a boat and didn't share much else, said she'd been inspired by my story. And then that night she sent me an email, a really long email, telling me that actually she had a terminal illness and she'd always wanted to live on a boat. And when she got the diagnosis, she was like, if not now, when? And she decided to live out her days on the boat. She actually passed a week ago. And my wife and I went to the celebration of life, her children. I've only met her twice, 3 times in person, but I became quite akin to her, and I'd never met her children, but they invited my wife and I to the celebration. And yeah, her words are now immortalized in this book, and her courage, and she'd fully accepted what was happening to her. And it's just so inspiring. Like, I still read the extract often, and just yeah, her words, they're so resonant for me about how we can accept the importance of accepting what's happening right now, and that can be translated into any way.
So, yeah, I'm going to have to reread that chapter. I just wanted to ask, where are we meeting you at now? So your book came out a month ago, but like you just said, you recently challenged yourself to 8 days, relying on the kindness of strangers in England. Are there any other challenges you have coming up? Like, is that something you want to be factoring in regularly, or do you want right now some routine?
Yeah, it's such a hard balance, because I love being out there connecting with people, but like I'm kind of challenging myself to slow down because it's like, you know, this real paradox of I live so slow on the boat and I've got all these kind of, ideas about how important it is to connect with ourselves. I want to spread this message so loudly that I'm here, there and everywhere talking about it. So it's like where I get really, I noticed a lot when I've been doing interviews and stuff, people will be like, what's next? And I'm like, honestly, like, get a knot in my stomach, because I'm like, this has been like 18 months in the work. You're an amazing author as well, so you know the process. And it's like, no one in this day and age or in this society can we just sit in what's happened. So people are like, so what's next? I'm like, nothing. Like, let me sit and bathe in all of this, because I need a rest.
I think it's also nice with any book which touches on mental health, and your book touches a lot on grief, which so many people go through. The nice thing is that you're giving this to people who need it, and word of mouth and getting messages from people who have found your book in that way is the most rewarding. So I guess the people who are sort of in the network making the book will never know that, and luckily I think that's why authors do it again eventually if they want to. I lastly wanted to ask you the title. I would love to hear a little bit about why you called it that, because it wasn't what I first thought when I heard you speak about this.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I made my Instagram account years ago, just called Adam Floating Home, and I was having like quite an existential time, and this idea, it kind of took on a double meaning. So obviously I live on a floating home, which is a boat, but essentially it means, we are all floating home to wherever we believe home is, whatever you believe happens after. And I just wanted this again to be a guide throughout the experience of you floating home.
Wow, it's brilliant. Adam has got into writing poetry. I don't know if you want to say how recently this has been, or whether this has been something you've always done but not publicly. But before we go into questions, Adam has got a poem which I've heard him perform live, which is really brilliant. So I'm going to let you do that now.
Thank you. Yeah, as soon as you open the book, the first thing is a poem, and it's this poem I'm going to recite. It's called Big People. I wrote it on a train in India. I guess it will speak for itself. It's not all fun and games, is what they said when I was small. Please start acting more mature, they'd preach to me in school. Do what I say, not what I do. That's what the big people would say. Respect me because I am older and I'm guiding you the right way. But the big people, they don't smile. They have a sadness in their eyes. The illusion of money and power so strong they can't even hear their own lies. But them I do not blame, because I know once they too were small, and they once had big people too, enforcing all of their rules. The religious man tells you how you should act, preparing for life after earth. But what if we're already in heaven, and you're not understanding your worth? The human mind, it holds so much power, evolved faster than all comprehension, forgetting we too are just nature, but that's something big people don't mention. I'm born as a human for now, before I turn back into dust. So why should I act oh so serious? You guide me like it's a must. And maybe it does keep you normal, and maybe it does keep you sane. The distractions that blind you from your inner truth, but you might not get this chance again. Please stop asking my plans for the future. I'll follow my heart, not my mind. I'll stay wild and free like the ocean, because I know we're of the same kind. The constructed thought patterns of riches, that was built by the big people too. But once you rip down the walls of illusion, you'll see the wealth, it's all around you. The plants, they provide us our food and our medicine for if we get sick. The mountains and spring bring us water to wash and to swim and to drink. Our energy we get from the sun, and the rainbow, it brings us the color. So how can you say you're not rich when all is provided to you from the mother? And maybe I don't act so serious. I cosmically dance and I play. But one day if I'm a big person, I'll let the small ones do it their way.
Okay.
Thank you.